My name's Patricia Ann Lockhart. I was born Patricia Ann Ayres, Ayres, daughter of Frank and Helen. I had 4 older sisters and brothers. When I was 7 months old, my mother had a hemorrhage. She went to the doctor, and he immediately knew that she had cervical cancer. And he told the family there was not much could be done, and she would probably live a year. They did some radiation on her, but radiation was very new in those days, and they overexposed her, and she was burned pretty badly on the outside of her stomach. They said she looked like leather. Then she became unable to care for a new baby. So Maud and Jim Golden, my future adoptive parents, went and got me and took me to their house where they could help care for me. My mother lived 1 year and 1 day from the time of diagnosis. She died at age 28 and was buried in Peoria, Illinois. I was 19 months old when she died, and my grandfather Kinsinger, who was my mother's father, said to my father Frank, "You leave that baby right where she is. Those people love her." They kept me in the house and raised me as their own, but my father didn't give permission for them to legally adopt me and change my name to Golden until 1944. And then Jim died 6 months later. I got my very first job when I was 14. I lied about my age and told them that I was 16 so I could get this job. That was the minimum age. And it was in the bakery up one city block from my house if I cut through an alley. And it was the best bakery in Peoria. It was a mom and pop operation called Melvin's Bakery. And they had the best baked goods I've ever had in my life. Every day when I came in from school, I had a Bismarck, which is a jelly-filled donut rolled in powdered sugar. And I worked every day after school and Saturday and Sunday. The owners were Seventh-day Adventists, so they didn't come in on Saturday, and we didn't bake that day. But we got in and we cleaned all these shelves, which were all glass. And I remember crawling in those cabinets and Windexing all the glass and the glass shelves, and it was kept spotless. It was beautiful, well respected. They did very much business, and we got all kinds of orders all the time on the telephone. And we had, of course, pastries and cookies and a lot of cream pies. Now back to my childhood. I met Daddy on a blind date when I was 14. My best friend at the time, Shirley Womble, lived across the street in the same house Pat Woosley had lived in till her parents moved out to a new house. And she had a brother that I liked very much who went in the Marines. But she had a boyfriend who had Bob Lockhart as a friend, and he had just broken up a 2-year relationship with a girl. We met. I was very, very shy, and we were really attracted to each other. And they took us to Steak and Shake on East Peoria River to get a sandwich or something. And I was so shy, I didn't want to eat any food in front of this new man I had just met. Of course, he was 19, so my mother's home fit to be tied because I got this older boyfriend. But anyhow, he was always a perfect gentleman, and there was no problem. But I wouldn't order anything to eat, and he says, "Well, you're going to eat something." So he ordered me a glass of tomato juice, and it was awful. I had never had tomato juice before. And what do? You're shy, you're on your first date, you want to try to make an attempt to drink it, but I remember yet how bad it was. But that was our first date, and we went to Steak and Shake all our 50-some years of married life after that. It was Daddy's favorite food, especially the chili mac. I was very fortunate to meet such a man that had such high standards and ideals. I had a couple of stepfathers, and I was a teenager then, but it makes it really hard on everybody. So I was very blessed to have Bob in my life, and we just had a really normal family life after that. We wanted to move to Bartonville so he would be close to his work at Keystone. But Bartonville was the perfect place to raise a family. Bob had been raised there. He was born in a house there that belonged to his grandmother. He and his cousin were born 6 weeks apart in this one bedroom where Bob was born. That was Grandma Kelly's house. And we loved living there. It was just the right size. We wanted out of Peoria. It had its problems. So we stayed there until we left in 1986 to come here to North Carolina to retire one day. I remember the kids growing up, and I think some of our best times were our camping trip. Of course, birthdays and Christmas were always a big deal and special. Kathy and Beth got cheated a little because their birthdays were 6 days apart, and they often had to celebrate with one party. But that's just the way it was. 5 years and 6 days apart. And then, of course, Chris had his birthday in August, and Bob had his, and we were married on Bob's anniversary, on Bob's birthday, and he never forgot an anniversary. We took a few vacations. I think nearly all of them were camping. I remember one, we didn't have much time or money, so we went to Springfield and got a motel with a pool. And that was really fun. We really enjoyed that. It was relaxing and didn't cost all that much. And I remember the kids going away to camp. I think probably Daddy and I were our happiest after he retired. We tried to do right by the kids, and one of us always be in the house when the kids were home. So we always worked shifts. He worked one shift, I worked another. And we did that for 15 years, passing in the doorway. And we did that for a couple of years, I guess. So when he retired to Murphy, after he put in his years at Lockheed, which was 1995, we had a really good time. We enjoyed each other's company. We did things that each other liked. Of course, we built this log cabin together, and that brought us really closer. We came to I wasn't working then when we built this house, but we lived in Atlanta during the week, and we'd come up here and work weekends. And I would have a list from Daddy what we needed to work that weekend. So I would go to Home Depot and buy everything that he needed. So I bought every nail and screw and nut and bolt that's in this house. Of course, I didn't know what they were. I just had it write it out for me so I could tell the clerk what I needed, and they'd get it for me. And then we'd load up the car, and we'd come up here, and we slept in the basement that we'd had poured first. We lived in it for 9 months while we put the logs up and did the electricity and all of that. Daddy could douse wells, and he doused ours, and we drilled the well, and it's a wonderful, wonderful well. We chose Murphy. We were looking for a place in Tennessee to retire to because both of our grandparents and my mother, of course, came from Tennessee in the same kind of valley along the same river. His were from Strawberry Plains and New Market, and mine were from north of Knoxville. But we couldn't find any land there that we liked that we could afford. So we came on over through the Cherokee, Smoky Mountain Park, came into North Carolina, and Connie and Roy and Jim had already bought a place here. So we came to Murphy to see it and just fell in love with the place. We liked the size of it. The land is absolutely beautiful. We went to a realtor, and they had the exact property we wanted, acreage with running water on the property and lots of privacy. So we bought this in 1982, but we were very happy here. We loved this property. We had such good times on it. Daddy set up a shooting range, and eventually we got ATVs and all of that. So it really was the right move, although I think at the time Daddy had his doubts. When Daddy got sick, it was so unbelievable. I thought it was so unfair, and it was so shocking. I had finished my chemotherapy for ovarian cancer just 2 weeks before that. And then Daddy came to me and said to sit down. He had something to tell me. And I always dreaded that because it was really, really serious. And I thought, well, he's leaving or something, you know. But he told me he had been coughing up blood. So, well, Daddy didn't even have a doctor because he was so healthy. He went every year to get an exam, physical, but he never was sick that he had to go see a doctor. So I found him a doctor that would take him. He told me on a Saturday or a Sunday, and I got a doctor to take him Monday, and we went in, and he really did great by him. He ordered he said, I'm going to send you to a pulmonologist. He thought he had pneumonia, but he said he's going to want a CAT scan, so I'm going to order it now. So we went and got his CAT scan, and a day or two later, the doctor called, and he read us the results, and it was what we both had expected. It was a tumor, and it nearly filled the lung, and he said that, I asked him how big it was, and he told me, I think it was 5 centimeters, so it was really big, and he sent us to this pulmonologist, and then he took care of Daddy until he died within 3 weeks. So he had the biopsy, and we went back Thursday, I think it was, and got the result. I think it was a Friday. And he told the doctor, he had told me before that, he did not want any treatment. He said, I've had a good life. I'm 76 years old. The Bible gives us 70 years, so I've made it past that. I'm not going to be sick like you were, Pat, and I'm not going to do anything. And he asked the doctor. The doctor wanted him to go see the oncologist. And Bob said, I don't want any treatment. He said, well, would you go talk to him? He says, yeah, I'll go talk to him. And he said, how long do I have if I don't have any treatment? And he said, less than 6 months. Well, Daddy thought that was good news. He thought he was going to live 6 months. And what you read the fine print in there, that means you might live that long. But Daddy was dead in 6 days after that. It was unbelievable. Such an early death, especially. I knew I wouldn't have him 6 months, but I thought I would have him at least 2 months. And there was a lot of things we need to discuss, but he actually slept, and then he wasted away very fast. The kids came on Sunday, Chris and Mona and the grandchildren, and I took pictures, and you can see just how bad Daddy looked in those pictures. But they all got to tell him goodbye. The saddest part was Kathy didn't make it. She was coming on Friday, and Daddy died Thursday morning. He had a beautiful death. He died standing up with my arms around him as I tried to help him back to bed. And I could see the light go out of his eyes, and he was gone. And I laid him down, and our friends Bob and Carol and Willer came over to help me, because I thought if we could get him back in bed, he might be all right. Kathy's death was a little bit easier because it was a shock, but I wasn't really surprised. I was just surprised at the timing. And when they called and said that she was in a coma, I was dumbfounded. We had just celebrated her birthday at her house, and then she went to the hospice the day after because she was dehydrated, and they wanted to give her some IVs. Well, they never did give her IVs, and she just went downhill in the hospice care. And she could only stay 4 days or something. I think she was there about 10, and then she died there. But I knew this disease would get her. I just couldn't get her well. We had her in rehab 5 times, but so much of a genetic thing. She tried to fight it, but the addiction was greater than anything she could fight with. I went through all the 7 stages of death before she died in all these 10 years. Anger, sorrow, concern, and acceptance finally. That, I can't do this. Only God can fix her. And he saw not to, and I understand that because Kathy could not function in this world. She just wasn't able to think things through anymore. She had enough brain damage from the alcohol. Her liver wasn't functioning properly. Her pancreas had just about stopped. But with Daddy's death, I felt really cheated because I wanted more time with him. I wanted to take care of him. 6 days certainly didn't prepare me for anything. I was just in shock through the whole thing. I thought, this can't be happening. I went from having a healthy husband to having a dead husband in just less than 3 weeks. So with Kathy, she didn't live at home anymore, and I think it was something that was always going to happen, but of course I hoped I would be gone when it happened, but it didn't happen that way. She died 11 days after her 50th birthday.